Welcome to Market Access Today. Please get ready to be charmed by expert insights and explore new frontiers. At today's Industry Talks, Dr. Stefan Walzer will be with me. Welcome, Stefan.
Hello, good to have me.
It is great to have you back here. As you may recall from our previous videos, he is the CEO and founder of MARS, Market Access Pricing Strategy, and Max Insights. And he has been teaching market access and negotiations since 2012. Today, we are hosting him for another look into the future of healthcare innovation, particularly with AI. In our previous videos, he shared information on the Max Insights and Cubo infrastructure and explained how it benefits stakeholders. I have two more main discussion points for today, which is one, Cubo, the first AI-based objection-handling platform, and Waffle, a virtual reality system integrated with an AI-based assistant. So let's start with Cubo. What is Cubo, and could you please provide a brief interview of the platform?
Yes, perfect. Thanks again for the introduction, and thanks again for having me with two new kind of other platforms. As you said, last time we introduced already two great platforms also based on AI. This time we basically have one platform based on AI, and it's also linked to another platform, which is called Waffle, what you also just said, which is a virtual reality, let's say, environment. Maybe we first start with the why, because ultimately, I think that's always the key thing, right? I mean, currently we do, for example, trainings for negotiations on market access and pricing, but also, for example, for sales and key accounts in a quite traditional way, as we have done it in the last, I don't know, probably 30, 40, 50 years, right? So it's basically having books, having papers, having presentations, and having, for example, PowerPoint slide kits we need to go through, and ideally need as well to know the insights. On top, obviously, you have a lot of, let's say, more internal documents provided, for example, by companies, which are, let's say, more kind of messaging and objection handling, all of the like. But it's all, let's say, hard copies, right, ultimately. So I think what we also all know, I mean, currently, these kind of, let's say, documents and materials are being provided most of the times through kind of more a way where everything's either be sent out, either being directly presented, or sometimes even by and within an annual or maybe biannual kind of bigger, maybe call it conference or an event, right? Especially within the industry. So it's settled there, it's explained, it's shown. A lot of times also, let's say, with a kind of showcase, how it basically looks like, and then you're basically left alone, right? And that's where and how it was done so far. I think I have basically two things to share why we basically came up with that kind of information, right? I mean, the first one is probably very simple. I mean, all of us, either in the industry, but also outside of the industry with any kind of other stakeholder, might still remember their first kind of either sales pitch or a discussion with the key account or any kind of other negotiation. I think most of us, I'm sure, basically still know how they felt. I think for sure everybody was nervous. For sure everybody was 100% stressed. And most of us would probably also just say, probably a bit unprepared and insecure, which doesn't mean that whatever we have all done in the past is totally wrong, right? It's just not, I would say it's not complete. And that's also, I think, one of the key things we always thought about, but ultimately we had one client already a couple of years ago who was coming to dinner before the negotiation on the next day. So we had all of the team members around us. There were the lawyers and some other guys from the company. We all spent already months and I think over a year with them together, prepared not only the negotiation, but also other parts, but obviously the last weeks intensively on the negotiation. So we went through it with role plays and the documents, whatever we have done, right? But the issue was the negotiation lead from the company was basically coming to the dinner totally nervous. I mean, he was too late. He was German, right? He was too late. So everybody was a bit, oh, what happened with him? He was coming with the folders, right? 2 big folders, everything printed, totally nervous. He was basically sweating and was just saying, you know what? I can't do this. I can't eat now. I'm still not prepared. I said, what? And then, we calmed him down. We asked him what the matter really is, all of the kind of stuff, right? And then you suddenly just say, you know what? I know that I've seen the pictures you have shown me. I know that we went through the role play. I know that basically I know the kind of details and the content, but I still don't know how it feels when I get into that room. And that was a bit where, we all thought, something is still missing. And that was a time when also virtual reality, at least with me, it was already some time ago, right? With me, it was the first kind of, let's say, touch point, right? I saw a couple of things, how those work. And I know that in some other industries, you have used it, especially with engineering and obviously with gaming in any way. And that was where I was just looking a bit around. So I was visiting different startup companies we were just doing virtual reality. So I just wanted to get a kind of understanding and a feeling how it really looks and feels if I get the virtual reality goggle on. So I went there while I was at another conference. I just visited 2 other kind of small startups with VR. It was a bit of a strange kind of house and typical startup kind of thingy, right? When then I put the goggles on and they just showed me, I think they programmed a meeting room, and there were a couple of things to do, right? It was most from engineering perspective, but it was so impressive that after maybe it felt like 10 seconds, maybe it was 30 seconds or maybe a minute. The whole thing, what you had on your eyes, just tricked your whole brain. And you couldn't imagine that you were still in that room, in that old building. You were in that virtual environment. You were speaking with that avatar who is giving you kind of advice what to do next. And that was where we just thought, you know what? We need to do something else. We need to do something on top. And that is where we then worked with one of those startups with our first version of, now it's called Waffle, where we just developed different rooms where we could basically mimic the various payer environments. So I think one of the rooms looks very similar to, for example, in the UK, in Italy, and obviously in Germany. We have obviously, because we're coming out of the German environment, also a couple of rooms which are basically looking like the GKV-SV and also the GPA kind of environment. So oral hearings, price negotiation, everything which is, let's say, person to person. So that was the first start of that. But that was still not, let's say, driven by artificial intelligence. This was still, that's myself, I would put the goggles on, and for example, yourself as a client, you put the other goggles on, and we could just, let's say, use that as a basis for the negotiation preparation, which helped already a lot. I mean, I've been a trainer in those kind of environments, but I also, let's say, turned that. I was also negotiation lead for a couple of clients, so I felt it as well the other way around. And even that, I think a couple of times my chief of staff was basically playing or being the negotiator on the other side, meaning on the payer side. I mean, I felt stressed after a couple of seconds, right? It was really pushy but it was not like, I saw him on the screen and the brain recognizes it's no threats. So stress level is a lot lower, pulse is a lot lower. It was different because you had that avatar who was really trying to push you into the corner, right? So that was really, really helpful. Also, when I then afterwards did the negotiation, you felt it, right? A couple of things, you cannot predict everything, right, in negotiation, but let's say 80% of it, right? And out of those 80%, I think you just felt, I know that objection. So, you could as well check, what is the mimic, what's the real reaction. You knew how to react generally. And even if you had maybe an area where you couldn't really go into the details and you didn't really know, or maybe you were not so 100% prepared because you couldn't foresee it, you still felt a lot more relaxed because you had that kind of stress situation, right? The body knew basically everything will be good, calm down, relax, breathe, and then just answer, right? And that was really helpful. That was not only our reaction, but it was also the reaction by different clients. So then the time basically came where all of us, let's say the whole world suddenly, let's say, saw what AI could do with ChatGPT and Gemini and whatever the kind of different names are. And that is where we just thought, okay, maybe we need to develop a version 2.0. And that's where we're now coming back to Cubo, and I'm touching base on Waffle again a bit later. So Cubo is basically the artificial intelligence who is now developing and speaking with you basically from a player's perspective. In simple terms, what you basically do is you take a document, an internal document, for example, I don't know, a kind of role play or play guide, a guidebook, how a negotiation should go like with the messaging, with the objection handling, or even simpler, there's maybe a manuscript suddenly out there of your competition with scientific paper, right? You just upload that into the Cubo, press that button, which is then creating the number of questions you want to raise. For example, find me 15, find me 10, find me, I don't know, 25 questions. And the Cubo is basically creating from that paper those kind of questions with the answers normally within a minute. And that's then what you have basically as the kind of next step. So it's not like, we've all developed these Q&As where you need to go through all the kind of documents again, which is good for preparation, but it's also, let's say, a bit, it's a bit stressful maybe to call it like that. So this is now being done in a fingertip, right? The important point here is also just to mention, because we all have probably known and heard about the kind of potential issues, I have to say, with the AI, which is sometimes also a bit the kind of security kind of issue, right? So which information being shared with the outside world. And especially in pharma or generally in the healthcare area, we should not share anything with the outside world, right? That is where we have used a pre-trained model, but that pre-trained model got a safety layer around that nothing's being shared with the outside world. We're not even sharing and using the information to let's say, further learn with the pre-trained model in order that, let's say, other clients, for example, ourselves would, let's say, get the benefits from it. So everything stays within that kind of little room. So if we would, for example, work with, I don't know, with a client A, and they would upload a document, this will all stay within their kind of frame. Everything will only be with the client A, even if a client B would, for example, have a similar kind of thing. The model would take the same kind of starting point as before. So nothing's being shared. So that was obviously the most important thing at the start of the development. So you could use that kind of, let's say, safe environment, upload document, and get the Q&A in a couple of seconds, which is, I think, already, at least what we have seen, quite great. But then we have, let's say, even gone to the next step, where we just said, okay, how do you, let's say, train and learn ultimately? How do you prepare, right, for key account, for sales reps, for negotiation in the pricing area? Normally, you should, let's say, first get, ideally, the kind of questions and be able to at least, let's say, quickly spot on, let's say, a cheat sheet or a paper or whatever that, you need to learn. And so from your mindset, but also obviously from maybe the document you have been provided with, right? So what we have then said is, okay, you know what? We need to have a kind of communication opportunity, possibility with Cubo, which is, let's say, a stepwise approach also from a learning perspective. Or if you don't like, but you could also jump in, obviously, another way. So one of the options is that you can start a conversation with Cubo. And the Cubo is basically, first of all, it's not just asking questions, but it's also introducing it, right? So you could, as well, let's say, define beforehand in which environment you are acting, right? In a hospital or in a public pharmacy or wherever. You could even, let's say, include, for example, that the Cubo, the AI, is either getting pushy or rather friendly or, let's say, challenging, whatever you want to add, right? Any kind of, let's say, types we all know from these different colors could be basically entered with different adjectives, right? So you could basically then enter and just say, you know what, I want to start in a text format, meaning the Cubo is giving you questions. So welcome in hospital A, blah, 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 great to meet you, haha. And then you get a question, right? So before I would buy your kind of product, what is the clinical benefit of your product? And then you need to answer, but you can do it in written, right? So you have a bit of time, you'd even have a look, you could just type it, and then you press the button. When you press the button, you get automatically as well as score from the system how you performed. You get that for every single question and answer, right? Which is not checking the exact wording. That was old school. It is basically checking the kind of meaning of it, right? So a building is very similar to a house, very similar to a villa, which is very similar to whatever, right? That's where what AI understands already, right? In the past, it was impossible, right? If you have not said building, it was basically 0 points. So that is now changing, right? So the whole sentence is being understood. Then you get an overall score if you have answered the question. Then you get the second question and so on, right? This is the text option. The second one is rather like a phone call where you basically just get the questions verbally. So you just hear it, right, through your audio. And you would also need to respond verbally, which is already a bit more, because if you write, you can quickly think, or you could rewrite, right? I mean, if you speak, you speak. So you need to think, or rather you would need to know already what you would need to say before you would basically respond. So that's, let's say, the next level of, let's say, also a bit of more stress, right? Still that, you could, let's say, look into in your environment, in your office or outside in your garden or whatever you want, right? It's still a bit of more content learning, right? But very similar again. It's just respond. It's basically introducing, let's say, the environment, getting the question, responding, back and forth. You also get the scores afterwards because you just speak, right? Meaning you have a sort of protocol within the Cubo system. So you could just check how you perform, what you do well, whatever. And that is basically a Cubo system where a lot of our clients are using it currently also, and especially, for example, to prepare and train their key accounts and their sales reps, especially, for example, when they are on the road, which is a big difference to any kind of learning environment we currently have, right? Sales reps drive a lot of times to their clients, meaning they have, let's say, difficulties to do something, obviously, on their tablet or on their computer, meaning they could do phone calls, or maybe they could listen to, I don't know, a podcast or to an audiobook or whatever, right? But this time, and that's what a lot of clients are now doing, that they say, look, just have Cubo with you. This is the session you need to run, and this is what you basically need to do until, I don't know, the end of the week or the end of the month or whatever. And then they can share, that's a bit of the internal policy, they can share as well the scores. Or the company simply says, you need to repeat until you have answered every question, for example, at least with a score of, for example, 80% or 75 or 90, right? You could just do it however you want to do, right? So this is the kind of Cubo system, what is, let's say, or could be used as well independent of the virtual reality part, which is then Waffle. Because obviously and ultimately, I mean, even that we have seen those funny pictures and videos from, let's say, the Apple goggle when it was launched from the US, when some of those basically have worn it and just were on, I don't know, on skateboards and wherever, right? I mean, I would not recommend doing it, right? That is why we just said, okay, you know what, split it. You have Cubo. You can use it in your environment, still on the go. You could even put it on your earphones, whatever, no problem. And ultimately, and that's where I'm coming back to, let's see, the introductory story beforehand, right? Where we just said, some of the clients, and ourselves as well, right? I mean, are sometimes nervous when you have never been in that environment, when you don't know how a room looks like, you don't know how the other side basically reacts, or you maybe know they might be pushy, they might be aggressive, but you can only train it without that virtual reality environment to a given amount, right? Because your brain is your brain, and you learned how you need to react in an environment where you're under danger or whether it's rather secure and safe. And that is obviously if you're learning with your colleagues, with your clients, or obviously with your consultants, if you're looking from the other way around, your brain recognizes everything is fine. They might be teasing you, but everything is good. So that is where you could, let's say, go to the next level and just say, you know what? I put the goggles on and I go through the same kind of thing again. And that is where we just say the Cubo is then the brain of the Waffle, meaning the Cubo is basically speaking through the avatar in the Waffle system. So no more myself and yourself, for example. You could now take the goggles on. You could just press the couple of buttons and just say, I don't know, I want to have the health minister of Turkey or the German GBA head or whatever. Press that button, and then you have that conversation based on the cues and the A's from the Cubo. So you see somebody standing there. So for example, we have meeting room, and you would be standing there. He would just say, "Oh, welcome to my office. Great to have you." And then you could say, "Yes, I'm great to have that meeting." Blah blah. And then you get the question, right? Okay, good. Listen, I have only 5 minutes time. What is the key benefit of your product before I would even buy it? And then you see and feel already it's a bit more tense. Sometimes if it's still that learning environment content, they would basically correct you if you have that in the learning environment, where if whenever you say something wrong, they would just tell you what is right. But obviously, if you have a pushy environment, what you can, let's say, quickly enter before you go in there, then they would, let's say, also correct you, obviously, right? And if it's not a friendly person, it would be rather pushy and aggressive, right? And that is where you could really feel it. That's again where, let's say, the whole kind of brain learns already how to react in those kind of, let's say, rather unsecure environments. You could also have it obviously in a pharmacy environment, or I think what we have also had is, for example, in an elevator. So it's more kind of elevator pitch, which is really, it's really a bit or quite stressful, I would say. I mean, we checked it in the validation phase where we put a content from pharma in there, but we have said that this avatar, because we wanted to as well test the extreme levels, we wanted to have the avatar basically as we call it the Italian killer. And that, yes, exactly. I mean, we're standing. So I was getting that kind of virtual reality room in the elevator, right? And then you had a bim, meaning the elevator space is starting to go, right? And then you have that person with a black suit and a tie, right? Just turning to you and so, okay, listen, I don't have a lot of time. And you felt a bit, it was very close, right? Because it was like in the elevator, right? So we said, oh gosh, hopefully I can get out there. I just want to speak about that product. So I mean, it was two things, right? What we just thought, you know what? It's quite good if you have those kind of environments where it's getting a bit closer and, just your body doesn't like that, right? Or at least I don't like it. And the other thing is obviously as well, you could just feel that, you could program the avatar, meaning the Cubo, that it's getting really aggressive. And that's, I think, what we wanted, right? Meaning the Waffle could bring you even to the next level. So having said that, some of the clients are basically saying, look, we want to have firstly that our staff should learn the content, that they're able to speak to that, first step. And then whenever they would, for example, go into environment where they speak and need to go to external parties, then it would be good to have, for example, as well, the goggles on, meaning to have some further training before you go there. Some are now using that, as I said earlier, with sales reps, with the key accounts. We have used that already with a lot of the environments in the negotiation kind of type, right? And pricing negotiations. We use that as well for trainings directly. And some others we're now just speaking with a couple of hospitals in Germany where they want to use that as well now for the onboarding of the new staff, which is a very similar kind of thing, right? We all know you need to learn SOPs, compliance documents, and a lot of things which are obviously important. But at the end of the day, it's rather, I don't want to say it's boring, but it's a bit of difficult to at least, I would say, remember, right? It's a bit dry. And if you have it in an environment what we have, right, where you just say it's a bit of more gamification, by just saying, okay, you need to hit the score before you could move ahead, right? Which is more like, okay, you know what? I quickly go through it because if I know it, I can basically advance pretty much fast. And if I even have that in the goggles, it's even a bit of a further thing, right? I can still play a bit around and press that button and go this one. And now I'm in this environment. And now afterwards, I maybe go into another room. And I still need to speak the whole thing, right? So you still need to learn the content. But I mean, research shows that, I mean, if you have more fun and if it's more gamification, you learn faster and better. So this is let's say, the whole kind of environment of the whole kind of, let's say, platforms we have. So it's the Cubo and the Waffle, but it can be used as well independently, meaning Cubo can be used independently. Waffle is, let's say, fed by the Cubo. That's a bit of, let's say, how we now introduce the kind of new learning environment into pharma and medtech world.
Thank you, Stefan. In fact, my next question would be how the stakeholders will benefit from these technologies, but you have already covered that part. Is there anything that you want to add from only a stakeholders' perspective, or you feel that you covered it?
It's a very good one, because ultimately that's also what, let's say, clients as well, let's say, are saying, at least after they have seen it and started to rethink again, right? I mean, a lot of times, oh wow, it can do this and that, and finally, it's at least their bosses are normally just come back and say, okay, that's great, but what is in there for us, right? Meaning, do we have any efficiency gains or whatever? And yes, of course. I mean, I think at the end of the day, research always shows that whenever people are better prepared, they do their job better, meaning sales would likely increase. The outcome of a negotiation would likely be better. That's at least what we have as well seen and heard from clients who have used it already. So it's really the kind of better performance individually, but then obviously as well within a team, because if everybody's prepared better, they can as well act in a much better way. It's also what research has shown, and that's again what was confirmed by clients of us, is that whenever you, let's say, are let me put it the other way around. Whenever you can do your content quite perfectly, you can also, let's say, react a bit more relaxed, and especially you could rather see and really try to analyze what the other side really wants, right? Because otherwise you're always in that stressful environment. I need to respond. What was the question? That's not good, right? You need to listen. But listening in negotiation is really hard if you need to really come back and remember what you should say, right? What is the messaging? And oh gosh, that was not that great, but oh, we had a hole there. No. You have covered all of that. You can be relaxed. You have been pushed already. If the question is coming, you can respond. And even if you don't know, you have learned how to, let's say, react to that. And that's what's in there, I think, for all of the stakeholders, obviously in all ways, right? I mean, we're also in discussion with some private payers in Canada, for example, who want as well to use it potentially. But that's the same thing, right? I mean, if they are better prepared, they will also get better results, because they can really focus on what is important in those kind of environments.
Thank you, Stefan. So, in fact, my next question will be more about going into the details of Waffle. In fact, you did a great job explaining it to us with Cubo. I think it's super clear at least from audience perspective. Just, is there anything that you want to add, even maybe from stakeholder perspective as well?
I mean, the only kind of thing is probably, I mean, whenever you have not yet used a goggles or virtual reality goggle, I mean, do it, because even if you see videos or whatever, it's different. I mean, if you test it, it's different. It's the same. And whenever we speak with potential clients and they see and they're rather interested, we just say, you know what, we come to your office, because you need to put the goggles on, because otherwise it's just different. And we had even, I think, a couple of clients, they just put it on. So, oh, wow, what is this? And then they slowly put it again on. It's like, oh my gosh, that's a person in there. So yes, it's just, I mean, if you have not yet been, let's say, exposed to it, right? Like maybe our kids or so, right? Or the younger generation. I mean, it is a bit strange, firstly, right? But then they put it on and it started to speak, and oh God, you need to answer. Oh yes, of course. And then it was okay. It's getting more natural in a way. And after just a couple of very few minutes, even somebody who has not been exposed to anything like that before, they really, let's say, started to think, okay, that's useful and it might help me. And it's quite super easy to use. No need for technical, let's say, understandings or whatever. You need to press a couple of things. You need to obviously choose, for example, which environment and those kind of things, even though a lot of those things can be prepared by the managers of the project, where sometimes we do it, but sometimes we also give it, let's say, to the client, who are then able to do it on their own. So that's maybe the only kind of additional thing. Obviously, if you want, I think rather either contact us, of course, or generally just put a goggle on there. That is also how I did it. Just try something out, even if it's a simple game or something. Just try it. It's firstly super fun, and secondly, you could really see and feel where and how it can really help you in a business environment.
That's great. Stefan, it's been an absolute pleasure having you with us today. Before we wrap up, I would like to mention the upcoming ISPOR Europe 2024 Congress, which will be held in Barcelona from November 17 to 20. I am proud to note that Market Access today is the official media partner of this event. The theme for ISPOR Europe 2024 is generating evidence towards health and well-being. I understand that Mars will also be attending this year. What are your expectations for the event? Are there any key highlights you would like to share with our audience in advance?
Oh yes. I mean, at the end of the day, I'm sure it will again be one of the biggest esports probably in the last, I don't know, whenever, 20 years. I think it was already the biggest in Europe, I think last year with, what was it, probably 6,000 attendees or something like that. And of course, I think from a content perspective, I think I would at least expect that we see at least also some further AI advancements also in the market access area, not only the ones we have discussed, but maybe even a bit more. And of course, from a content perspective, it's also important, the whole kind of joint HTA, which is, let's say, speeding up and will be as well in effect, let's say, in a couple of few months. So there will be some further new insights, hopefully, a lot of new analysis, a lot of new, let's say, recommendations. And that's, I think, where I'm at least looking forward. I think we have also the Dobo, I think what you also mentioned in your introductory words, which is also helping, for example, in creating those JCA dossiers. But I think overall, I personally am looking forward to meet a lot of, let's say, people, a lot of old colleagues, old friends, and obviously as well a lot of new people, a lot of new potential, let's say, connections. And I'm also obviously looking forward to meet you and the team as well in Barcelona, and to catch up there again as in person.
Thank you for sharing that. So as Market Access today, we look forward to meeting you and our entire community in Barcelona. And we want to meet and mingle and talk about industry globally. And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Until next time, take care and stay curious. Thanks, Stefan.
Thank you, Asnur.